Hello, Jacksonites! Debuting a brand new jack-o'-lantern shirt. This is the only orange shirt that I own. How do I look in it? Do I look like a giant pumpkin? um, Welcome to a video that I sort of promised that I would do. How long has it been? I think it has been close to 2 years. Let me not listen to myself. Um, oh, okay. Well, sort of close to 2 years. Um, Back December 2nd of 2021, I did a review of the original Candyman, and I promised at the very end of it that I would do a review of today's movie in the next video. Well, that didn't turn out happening. So, I mean, I guess better late than never, and sometimes it is best if a new movie comes out that you want to talk about, if you just let it simmer for a while before you jump right on to talking about it. Um, and in this case, it's definitely been a good thing that I've waited this long to talk about this movie. Today, I will be doing a review of the 2021 requel to the original Candyman, also titled Candyman. How original. So this is obviously following in the new trend of what was started with Halloween 2018, doing a requel or reboot sequel to classic horror films, and giving them just the same name. Texas Chainsaw Massacre sort of did this with the Netflix version. Candyman did this. Scream did this. In fact, Scream 2022, or Scream 5 as I just call it, did the same thing. It's just called Scream. Um, yeah, this is definitely following in that trend, and I really wish this movie did not follow with that trend, because Candyman 2021 does not really roll off the tongue very well, in my opinion. But anyway, so yes, indeed, as I stated back in December of 2021, I reviewed the original Candyman. And since then, Candyman has gone on to be actually one of my top 20 favorite horror films of all time. I stated in my review back then that every time I watch Candyman, it grows on me more and more. And this is the case, because at one point I simply called it an honorable mention, but I have watched it enough times to the point where it now has become one of my favorites. It's low on that list, but it is definitely a classic in the horror genre, and especially in 90s horror. It's one of the best horror movies to come out of the 90s, potentially the best. Um, the original Candyman is it's a classic. This movie, not so much. I don't mean to start off on such a negative start with this video and review, but yeah, I'm not gonna lie, guys. Candyman 21 just doesn't really do much for me, unfortunately, and that really sucks, because I can see that a lot of effort went into this movie, and I can tell that the filmmakers were really trying to do a worthy sequel to the original Candyman. But for me, nah, this just doesn't work for me. So, Candyman 21 is a 2021 supernatural slasher film directed by Nia DaCosta, who is a African American female director. Um, she wrote and directed the crime thriller film Little Woods in 2018. She directed this movie, and in August of 2020, Nia was hired to direct The Marvels, becoming the youngest filmmaker to direct a Marvel film, beating the record set by Ryan Coogler, who he did Creed and Black Panther. And Nia is currently in production of a adaptation of Hedda Gabler, which is a Norwegian play. Hmm. Oh, okay. Oh dear. I can see that being preachy, but that's beside the point. Hmm. Anyway, so yeah, Candyman 21. The film is a direct sequel to the 1992 film of the same name and is the fourth film in the Candyman film series. So, Candyman, the original 1992 film, did receive two sequels. Um, Candyman Farewell to the Flesh, released in 1995, and Candyman Day of the Dead, released in 1999. The second one, from what I've seen, is like kind of is watchable, but it doesn't really look that interesting. And it looks like it is just a very generic sequel that's not even half as good as the original. And Farewell to the Flesh, from what I've seen, is a complete piece of garbage. So, yeah. And then there's this movie. Um, the film stars Yahya Abdul Mateen II, Tiona Paris, Nathan Stewart Jarrett, and Coleman Domingo, with Vanessa Williams, Virginia Madsen, and Tony Todd reprising their roles from the original film. Barely. Plans for another Candyman film began in the early 2000s, with original director Bernard Rose wanting to make a prequel about Candyman and Helen's love. However, the studio turned it down. Sadly, that would have been a much better film. And the project entered development hell. By 2018, Jordan Peele signed on as producer for a new film using his company Monkey Paw Productions, and later in November of that same year, Universal Pictures and Metro Goldwyn Mayer Pictures became involved, and it was confirmed that Peele would produce the film with Rosenfield, while DaCosta signed on as director. Candyman was theatrically released in the United States on August 27th, 2021 by Universal Pictures. Its release date was delayed 3 times from the original June 2020 date due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The film received generally positive reviews from critics who praised DaCosta's direction, visual style, and the blend of social commentary with horror. It grossed $77 million worldwide against a $25 million budget. My personal history regarding this movie, so quite remember I don't quite remember how I found out a new Candyman movie was being made. I do know that it was at some point after I had seen Get Out and Us, and I like both of those movies. And so I was excited when I saw Candyman and Jordan Peele in the same sentence. So I was thinking, "Ooh, is Jordan Peele gonna make a Candyman movie? That'd be perfect." Sadly, no. God, I wish Jordan Peele could have directed this movie. Would have been so much better. But anyway, so yeah, I don't quite remember how my interest in this got started, but I remember that my hype was somewhat peaked when the last time that I ever went to the movie theater, when me and Meadow went to go see A Quiet Place 2 in theaters. I saw the poster for this movie, and that's when it hit me. Oh, yeah, there's another Candyman movie on the way. And while I wasn't as much of a fan of the original as I am now, I did remember rewatching the film and liking it a lot more, so I was interested. The film was delayed a whole bunch of times, and when it came out on DVD, I said, "Okay, yeah, I'm gonna go out and get this." So I did, and I watched it the night that I bought it, and I didn't know what to think of it. So about a week later, me and Meadow sat down and we watched it a second time, and it sunk in more, but I just let it simmer for a while. So, upon watching James A. Janice's podcast with his now wife Chelsea on the channel Dead Meat, and then watching his kill count video for this movie, it kind of inspired me to, because a couple weeks ago I rewatched the original Candyman again with Meadow. She gave it a 7 out of 10. I give it a 9. Um, but I was just kind of inspired to, you know what? I said I didn't want to watch this again, but I think I do. So last night, actually, as soon as I got home, I sat down and I watched Candyman 21 for the third time in my life. And now I can definitively say this is disappointing. Shawnee Boy down here is here saying this movie didn't live up to the hype. It's clear there was some definite reshoot changes in post. Yeah, I can agree. This is not a worthy sequel to the original Candyman, unfortunately. And that really sucks because there are some good things that went into this movie. And I can see that the filmmakers, especially with Nia DaCosta, she really tried to make this a worthy sequel to the original. But unfortunately, it's held back by a lot of very unfortunate decisions that really shot this movie in the foot. This was not worth being delayed 3 times, and this was not worth waiting nearly 25 years to see another movie. Um, I want to say that this is kind of a mixed bag. I do think that, but I think it leans more towards being on the negative side, unfortunately. I wanted to like this movie a lot more than I do. I can't say for sure. Shawnee Boy is here saying at least it's better than 2 and 3. I can't say for sure. I mean, definitely looks better than 3. Holy shit. But God, I wish Jordan Peele could have directed this movie. It would have been so much better. So, before we begin, a word from our sponsor. And let's get into the plot. In 1977, at Chicago's Cabrini Green housing projects, a young boy witnesses the killing of Sherman Fields, a homeless African American man with a hook for a hand. Suspected of giving a white child a razor blade and a piece of candy, Sherman is beaten to death by police, but later proven innocent. Oh dear. In 2019, artist Anthony McCoy lives in Chicago with his girlfriend, gallery director Brianna Cartwright. Seeking inspiration, Anthony explores the projects after Brianna's brother Troy tells them the story of Helen Lyle, who is believed responsible for a killing spree and briefly kidnapping a baby in Cabrini Green. Stung on the hand by a bee, Anthony meets laundromat owner William Burke, the boy who witnessed Sherman's death. William introduces him to the urban legend of the Candyman, which Anthony tells Brianna and jokingly performs its curse by saying Candyman 5 times to a mirror. Sherman's spirit will appear and kill the summoner. Inspired by Sherman's death and the Candyman legend, Anthony creates an elaborate art piece titled Say My Name for a show curated by Brianna and her colleague Clive, a very offhand reference to Clive Barker, who is the most annoying character in this movie. Fuck, I hate Clive. But his work is disparaged by critic Finley Stevens and other attendees. Later that night, Clive and his girlfriend Jerica unwittingly summon the Candyman, who brutally murders them. Brianna discovers their bodies, triggering childhood memories of witnessing her father's suicide. Anthony, Anthony compulsively paints gruesome portraits of unknown men, becoming obsessed as he investigates Helen Lyle and her own Candyman research, and has a vision of Sherman's ghost in an elevator. Interviewed by Finley, Anthony goads her into summoning the Candyman herself and has another vision in a mirror of himself as Sherman. Joining Brianna at a business dinner, he leaves abruptly when he learns Finley has been murdered. Anthony goes to William, who explains that the legend originated in the 1890s with Daniel Robitaille, the original Candyman, an artist who had an interracial affair with a white client's daughter, was mutilated and burnt alive. The legend has been renewed for generations, with the souls of other murdered innocent black men joining the Candyman hive. These are the subjects of Anthony's paintings. Anthony attempts to protect Brianna, but only frightens her with his increasingly erratic behavior. A teenager who attended Anthony's show and her friends are killed after summoning the Candyman in their school bathroom. Anthony undergoes a physical transformation, spreading from the bee sting on his hand across his entire body. He confronts his mother, Anne Marie, played by Vanessa Williams from the original movie, after visiting a hospital and learning that she lied to him. He was born near Cabrini Green, and he was the baby taken the night Helen died. He's baby Anthony from the original Candyman. Anne Marie admits that the Candyman was responsible for the bloodshed blamed on Helen, and the community vowed never to speak his name. Brianna seeks out William, who abducts her to an abandoned church where Anthony is in a fugue state. Shortly after Sherman's death, William witnessed his return as the Candyman when his sister and her friend summoned him and were killed. Real quick, a fugue state is a mental or behavioral disorder that is classified variously as it's characterized by reversible amnesia. It's essentially a trance. William plans to resurrect the Candyman hive to take revenge against the racist forces that have blighted the community. Sawing off Anthony's hand and replacing it with a hook, William has called the police to have Anthony wrongfully gunned down as another vengeful spirit to join the hive. Chased into the Cabrini Green row houses, Brianna stabs William to death with a box cutter. She is confronted by Anthony, who collapses in her arms and is shot dead by police. Detaining Brianna in the back seat of a car, the police try to intimidate her into agreeing that Anthony was the killer and his shooting was justified. Instead, she uses the rearview mirror to summon the Candyman, who appears as Anthony and massacres the police. Swarming with bees, his face transforms into that of Daniel Robitaille, played once again by Tony Todd, instructing Brianna to tell everyone what she has witnessed. Ending the movie. The film's end credits feature a shadow puppet montage of members of the growing Candyman hive, including Daniel, Sherman, Anthony Crawford, James Byrd Jr., George Stinney, and Anthony himself. So how about this plot? As I said, it's a mixed bag. I can see the effort, and I can see that the filmmakers obviously were trying to pay a lot of respect to the original Candyman, and they tried their best to make this feel like the true spiritual sequel to the original Candyman. Um, but it's I can't really divulge my full thoughts on the plot without getting into my cons. But I'll just say for right now, on the surface, I think the plot is enjoyable enough, but the more you dive into it and the more that you try to think about it and make sense of it, the more it just kind of falls apart, unfortunately, for me. So, with all that being said, let me jump into my pros and cons. I have one, two, three, four, five, six, seven. I have seven pros, four mixed elements, and 10 cons. The one of them is kind of layered. Or maybe it's nine cons. But pro number one, this movie has excellent cinematography. This movie is very, very well shot. There's lots of slow zooms on cityscapes. There's lots of slow, wide open pan shots. There's lots of just very pleasing camera work. Hey, it's Jackie Boy is here. Boy, you need to get off your ass and watch the original Candyman. But thank you for sharing. Um, oh yeah. Like one shot that comes to mind that's always very pleasing. Near the end of the movie, when Anthony has visited a hospital regarding his bee sting, working on a review of Iron Man. Oh man, are you gonna crack open the MCU after 10 years? That's a can of worms. But anyway, um, yeah, after Anthony is leaving the hospital, he's walking down this narrow, like kind of tunnel that connects to hospital buildings, and it's raining, and a lot of the this tunnel is glass, and the camera follows Anthony as he's walking with this dazed look on his face, and you hear the sounds of his footsteps, and as he's passing through the tunnel, you can see the rain dripping down the tunnel, and you can hear the rain splattering all over the glass. It's a very pleasant sound, and it's a very pleasing shot. There's also lots of zoom outs in order to show a lot more of the cityscape that you didn't see was there. Um, there's lots of good use of colors and lighting. Thankfully, it's not Alien versus Predator Requiem levels of dark at times, but it's more like it's darkly lit in order to create a creepy atmosphere. But it also does a good job of making scenes feel creepy when it's brightly lit. More on that when I get to the scares. And the opening scene too, it's kind of a nice inverse of the opening of the original Candyman. The original Candyman was a camera shot looking down upon the streets of Chicago. This movie begins with a bunch of shots looking up at the tops of skyscrapers in Chicago. And as it goes on, it gets darker and more cloudy and foggy, and it feels a bit disorienting watching it, but in a good way. It's creepy, it's ominous, and it's foreboding. So this movie definitely has great camera work. Pro number two is the music in this movie is quite solid. Thankfully, this movie does bring back the original Candyman theme composed by Philip Glass in a couple scenes, but it is recognizable and it's a nice update. It's a lot more subtle and it's a lot more. Sorry. Um, yeah, it's appreciated that they bring back the original Candyman theme. That ties into another pro that I have for this film. But this movie, the music was done by Robert Ike Aubrey Lowe. I believe he was a student of Philip Glass. So, um, while it's not quite as iconic as the music done for the original movie, it's iconic in its own right regarding this movie. There's lots of tracks that sound very creepy and ominous and suspenseful. It does sound like horror movie music, thankfully, but it also is. Um, it's not big jump scare, out and out bombastic music. It's sort of similar to the original movie, where it's a lot more subtle. It's a lot more beautiful, but it's haunting and spooky. And of course, the most iconic theme from this movie is the one used in the opening and the very end of the film. Um, I can't really um like say it out loud, but it's iconic in its own right. But yeah, overall, not much to say, but the music for this movie is good. But I agree with Shawnee Boy here saying music is good in this movie, but the original Philip Glass score is way, way better. Speaking of which, pro number three, there are some decent scares. I do think that in maybe a couple ways, this film might be a bit scarier than the original movie. The jump scares aren't as strong as the original, but I think the tension and creep factor is a bit stronger here than the original. Um, there are some good shots where um, like, this is one of those movies where you, like, look for Candyman in the background, or you don't look for Candy, but you, like, look for the ghost in the background, and if you pay attention, you can see, Candyman pop up quite a few times all throughout this movie, usually in a reflection of a mirror or he's in a far off shot, and you can just, like, barely see Candyman poking his head around a corner. Um a lot of the music does help to sell the scariness in this movie too. And hold on, I need to shut my window. Okay, peace and quiet. Um, and there are some jump scares in this movie. They're not as good as the original, which is something I forgot to. Oh, thank you, Sean. I'm gonna use that later. Um, the original had some like really effective freaky jump scares, but here they feel just more like modern day horror jump scares. It's just a loud noise coming out of nowhere just to startle you, startle you, but doesn't really stick with you. um oh, that's from the original. I thought you were talking about this movie. Shit. Anyway, so fuck, I keep getting distracted. Arguably, the creepiest scene in the whole movie is Anthony's second mirror vision with the original, or not the original, with Candyman in this movie. When he's in Finley's apartment, he goes to look for her, but he sees Sherman in the reflection of a mirror. But whenever Anthony moves, Candyman moves as well, implying that he sees himself in Candyman. And that shot was done pretty well effects wise, if you ask me, because there's no mirror. The bees and the hook are all CGI, but there's no mirror. Yahya and the guy playing Sherman are actually on screen together, and they consulted a movement expert in order to for the two actors to nail making it seem like they were moving at the same time in the exact way, giving the illusion that Anthony is seeing his reflection as Candyman. It's pretty well done, and all that Sherman does is just stare at him blankly and like have this really raspy breathing. And it's a really creepy, trippy shot that kind of gets under my skin, especially with all the bees. It's probably the spookiest scene in the whole movie, honestly. Um, yeah, not much to say. This movie has decent scares, but it's not as hauntingly. What's the word? Oh, that's another thing. Yeah, the body horror elements of this movie are quite strong too. Namely, if you're somebody who's afraid of or like who has trypophobia, like a fear of clusters of small holes, this movie might get under your skin, no pun intended, because throughout the movie, Anthony he gets stung by a bee and he just keeps picking and pulling at his scab, and this like infection starts growing up his arm, and it spreads to his chest and the side of his face, and it's just this big cluster of small holes. And I don't necessarily have trypophobia, but it does look very unsettling and gross as it keeps spreading all throughout Anthony's body. And yeah, it's quite gnarly to look at. And it was done practically too. It was a whole bunch of makeup and prosthetic effects. There's maybe a little bit of CGI. Well, the Candyman hook on Anthony is CGI. It's a green screen glove, but um, yeah, the body horror elements is all practical and it looks good. And that's another thing I'll say. This isn't necessarily an extra pro, but the special effects overall in this movie I think are quite strong. There's a lot of CGI and green screen effects that I think look good. Whenever Candyman floats around in midair, I don't see any strings, or it doesn't look like a poor green screen effect. It looks good. The blood effects are mostly CGI, but there is some practical blood. Then it looks fine. I don't see any bad squibs, or not squibs, but like bad blood tube effects or anything like that. A lot of the wounds that Candyman inflict on people are, from what I can tell, practically done. Like when one chick gets her throat slashed open, that's a pretty gnarly effect. When Clive gets gutted, you only see it for a brief moment, but it is bloody and visceral and gnarly. Um, Also, when Clive he gets hooked by his Achilles tendon by Candyman, and then he gets yanked and he smashes his face into a concrete ground, and blood splats everywhere. I think that was done practically too. So I wouldn't necessarily say this movie is as violent as the original Candyman film, or at least it's not as shockingly violent as the original. But this movie does have some decent kills and some pretty visceral moments. So the effects are good. There's decent jump scares, and there is a good creepy atmosphere. And the best part of the scares in this movie, at least as far as I'm concerned, this is a good example of a movie where you watch it and you feel like you yourself are being watched. Not as much as Signs, but in a similar manner. So I can appreciate that about this film. And I already talked about the kills. That was pro number 4. There's some good kills. Lots of throats getting slashed. Lots of people getting gutted. This movie has almost 3 times as many kills as the original Candyman, so that's a plus. There's a lot more kills, um, and there's a decent amount of blood, so that's cool. Pro number 5. I have things to say about the characters, but overall, I will say all of the performances in this movie I think are quite strong. Nobody really gives a bad performance. Um, Yahya Abdul, who I know him much better as Black Manta in Aquaman 2018, but he gives a good performance. He doesn't feel like Black Manta. He just feels like an everyday, average Chicago artist who grew up in the projects. Like he has that ghetto hood attitude to him, but usually done for comedic effect. Um, He's got some good facial expressions. He's got some good body language. When he's in his fugue state, I buy him as being in a fugue state. He looks like he's in a trance and he's completely oblivious to the rest of the world. Um, what's her name? Tiona Paris does a really good job as Brianna. She's a little sassy, but she's also very high spoken and well educated. And she comes off as um, classy, but also fun and funny to be around. Her brother Troy is a gay black man, but he's funny and he's entertaining enough. Um, yes, but it's also a shame. I'll get back to that later. What something that Shawnee Boy here is saying. Um, Not much to say about the cast other than just the performance. Well, actually, no, I have some stuff to say about the cast, but the performances are good, thankfully. At least they have that going for them. Oh, yeah. Oh, damn. Now you're just making the ending even worse for me, Sean. Pro number 6. Anthony's Candyman speech is very haunting. When Anthony becomes the Candyman at the end of this movie, his voice is not as iconic as Tony Todd's. I don't think any other black man aside from Keith David will have an iconic voice as much as Tony Todd. But Anthony's speech at the very end is quite haunting and effective. I am the writing on the walls. I am the sweet smell of blood on the street. The buzz that echoes in alleyways. They say I shed innocent blood. You are far from innocent, although you will be called that. Or something along those lines. Um, it is spooky, and it does land like hits you home that this is no longer Anthony. This is just full on Candyman taking full shape. So it's kind of spooky. It sends shivers up my spine every time I listen to it, and it is an awesome deliverance by Yahya Abdul. And the last pro that I have for this movie is the paper cutout scenes. A lot of this movie, like whenever there's a flashback or an urban legend being told, it's utilized using shadow puppets. Uh, I call them shadow puppet vignettes. There are these brief scenes using paper cutout shadow puppets to illustrate a flashback. Um, they're very well done. They're very well animated. Um, the shapes and lighting is very well done. Even though you can see the hands pulling the strings, you don't really notice them once you start listening to the story and you start paying attention to what's happening on screen. Hi, honey. And I just think they're visually pleasing and entertaining to watch. And especially with both Helen Lyle's story at the very beginning and the end credits illustrating the various Candymen being killed throughout the decades. The Candyman theme is used over those scenes, so it's spooky, and as I've described Candyman multiple times, they're also hauntingly beautiful. And all these cutout scenes were all done practically with real paper cutout puppets, and they used fire to light the background, so it gives it a kind of flickering, hypnotic, creepy feel to it. But yeah, they're great, visually pleasing, entertaining, and a bit spooky. So honestly, the cutout scenes are the best parts of the movie. Yeah, Shawnee Boy here is saying the shadow puppetry was the most effective stuff in the movie. I agree. And do you? Okay, so I have 4 mixed elements in this movie. Starting off with number 1, Anthony himself. Yahya Abdul Mateen II, rolls right off your tongue, that name. His character is very strange. So it's revealed when the movie is almost over that he's the original Anthony from the first film. He's baby Anthony who was kidnapped by Candyman. And this movie treats it as if it was a twist, but if it was, it's a piss poor twist in my opinion, because I saw this coming from day one of this movie coming out. And when I first started the movie, I just knew, yeah, that's Anthony from the original movie. So I was really confused when this movie treats that as being a twist. And also, if you're very familiar with the first movie, as soon as you see Vanessa Williams from the first movie, you just know, oh, that's baby Anthony. So why is this treated as a twist? I don't know. But his character, too, is very odd. There's some scenes when he's kind of unlikable, like the movie's trying to go for something that would be implemented in Jordan Peele's Nope, because when Clive and his girlfriend are discovered dead at the art gallery, there's a shot of Anthony's face watching the news, and he has this weird dead trance like look on his face, and he acts like a spoiled rotten brat when he hears his name in the news and they're talking about his art piece, and it just feels a bit forced and out of nowhere the way he's acting, like, oh, they talked about me, they talked about my work, they said say my name. Like, what? Why are you acting like this? Pardon Meadow, she's making food, wearing the same shirt as me. Um, and as for his connection to Candyman, so I guess it's oh well, this ties into one of my cons with this movie, so I'm actually going to save that. So Yahya gives a good performance, but his character is just all over the place. Is he supposed to be a troubled artist that slowly goes insane? or is he a chosen one who's supposed to become the next monster of the movie? Like, which is it? Is he destined, or does he choose to become the next Candyman? Like, which is it? Mixed element number 2 is Helen's urban legend. Now, like I said, I love the shadow puppet scenes, but I'm not a fan of how Helen's urban legend is told in this movie. I get the intent and I get its purpose. Its intent is to show why Candyman has never been talked about until now. Candyman's legend has been replaced by Helen's legend. And I also get that it's like the point of urban legends over the generations. Urban legends twist and change as years go by to the point where they become like people add elements to the stories and they change certain elements and they add certain words and change words here and there to the point where the urban legend doesn't even remotely resemble the original story that it's based on. So I get that with how Helen's story is told, it's told from a perspective of somebody telling it 30 years after it happened. I get the intent, but I don't like how it vilifies Helen and turns her into a monster. It feels a bit too mean spirited and too forced going into this movie's social commentary, which I'm not a big fan of. It adds another element to Helen's character and some feelings I have towards her character. God, she's such a poor woman in the original movie. And I get that's also the intent of the original film. Um yeah, it's like what Shawnee Boy here says. It feels like it's just a bunch of bullshit because we saw the first movie. And it also downplays Helen's congregation that she gained at the ending of the first movie when she sacrificed herself to save baby Anthony. What the hell happened to all those people? How did this story come to be when all of these people saw Helen sacrifice herself to save a baby? Like, what? It just feels a bit forced and mean spirited, in my opinion. Oh, and yeah, we can't forget that Helen kills Trevor. Nor should we. What's the matter, Trevor? Scared of something? That's Meadow's favorite scene in the movie.
Yep.
She just wishes the floozy could have gotten skewered too.
I really do.
So overall, yeah, I like elements of Helen's urban legend scene. I like how it's shot, and it is a creepy story. But I don't like how it vilifies her and turns her into a monster. It just feels forced and mean spirited. Mixed element number 3 is the bathroom massacre scene with all the high school students. I kind of agree with James A. Janice when he said, I only half think that this was shot only for the trailers. Yeah, I can kind of see that because while it's a cool and creepy scene, there's some good gore and good kills. It is kind of spooky when you see Candyman floating above the ground in one quick scene. It's isolated from the rest of the movie and has no impact whatsoever on the characters and the story. It just feels like a random scene just thrown in to include more kills, increase the already short runtime, and just add more bodies to the body count. It feels so isolated and forced. It's a good scene, but I just wish it was more naturally weaved into the story in the film. And mixed element number 4, most of the characters are either boring, stupid, or annoying. I already talked about Anthony. Brianna is, I think, more on the boring side. Actually, no. She's both boring and stupid. The stupid side is just because I don't really like the type of person that she is. She is the type of person that just ignores tragedy and continues with her life pretending everything is fine. She doesn't want to face her fears. She doesn't want to face her problems. She just wants to squish it down and move on with her life all willy nilly. It's a little annoying. I do like that they incorporate some elements to her character that's like the anti-white person character. When she looks at a dark basement down a dark staircase, she's just like, nope, and turns around. When Troy asks her, do you want to hear a scary story? She goes, no, but they go ahead anyway. Um, when Anthony is trying to do the Candyman curse, she's like, no, don't you dare. We don't need that kind of shit. I think that is kind of funny. And I see what they're doing. But other than that, I just find Brianna to be just a kind of a boring character. There's nothing overly special about her that makes her stick out amongst the pantheon of other horror movie leads. She's just kind of blah. Brianna's brother Troy is just a gay black man. He's funny, but that's it. He's very one note. He's just, here's the gay black man being a gay black man. Clive sucks. Clive's girlfriend sucks. And Finley Stevens, I think her name is, the art critic. She's just a typical snobby white art critic. She's very full of herself. She's very detached and very snobby and kind of a dick. She's only interested in Anthony's art after it gets mentioned in the news so that she can be kind of like a fame chaser or an ambalam chaser. What? Yeah, I'm not a fan of Finley. She does get a good kill though. Yeah, that's it. The characters are just very flat and boring, stupid, or annoying. Not a huge fan of this movie's cast. I again see that they're kind of mirroring the original Candyman's cast because that one didn't have a huge cast in and of itself too, but that didn't really matter because Helen was a very good lead. You got attached to Helen and you followed her story all the way through. This movie lacks a Virginia Madsen, so the cast just feels kind of empty and flat. And my no, yeah, I already talked about that. So now with all the mixed elements out of the way, let us get into the cons. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, which has 3 parts to it. 5, 6. Oh, I have 7 cons. Okay, never mind. But actually, I will just call it 10. So, I'm actually going to need a drink for this. Hun, can you get me a drink? Another soda, please? Oh, damn. Where the hell do I start? Oh, okay. Con number 1. The lack of Tony Todd and Virginia Madsen. Tony Todd, I shit you not, has 10 seconds of screen time in this film. What the fuck? How the hell do you have a Candyman movie, which was the film that didn't start Tony Todd's career, but is arguably his most iconic role, and you give him only 10 seconds of screen time? What the fuck is wrong with you? Yeah, I'm gonna need a beer for this.
A beer.
And Virginia Madsen, she doesn't even have, she's only seen through photographs from the original Candyman. She makes a voice cameo on a tape recording that Anthony listens to halfway through the movie. And while it's nice to have her back, it just rehashes shit from the first movie that we already knew. Oh, Jeff is here too. He also likes the shadow puppets. Yeah, really are the best parts of the film, wouldn't you say? But and with this being a requel, aka a legacy sequel, why the hell would you not have some of the legacy characters back for more than just 10 seconds? Was it for budgetary reasons? Or is it because you want to replace those OG characters with these new bland, flat, and boring ones? God, this brings to mind Terminator Dark Fate. Yeah, lack of Tony Todd in Virginia. It's incredibly frustrating and insulting. Con number 2, the forced social commentary. So I'm going to try to tread a bit carefully when I'm talking about this. So the original Candyman has its social commentary. It deals with race and class issues, and like the original short story the film is based on. But in the original, the social commentary is second to the film's story, like how it should be. You can take the film at face value and just watch the movie from A to B, and that's that. You can look deeper, and you can um, see a lot of social commentary and allegorical um, elements of the film, but they don't interfere with the film's story. They're there if you want them, but they're optional. With this movie, it does the opposite, in my opinion. This film focuses more on the social commentary at the expense of the film's story. It's very preachy how many Black Lives Matter social issues that this movie talks about. Poor ghetto neighborhoods being cut off in their own cities and left to die. Black men being beaten to death by swarms of police officers. Black men being lynched. Racism, class problems, fuck the police, all white people suck, all white people are assholes. It's very preachy, shoved down your throat and in your face. And for me, it's very off putting. I understand that these all are legit problems that still to this day plague the world. So I get it, but this is not how you do good social commentary. The original Candyman is a good example. It told its story first, but the social commentary was second. This movie does the opposite. I don't like watching a movie that just beats you over the head constantly. Hey, police suck. Police are corrupt. White people suck. Black people get killed too many times by cops and racism. I get it. Can we watch a ghost man with a hook hand kill people? No. Then I kind of don't want to watch this movie. So, I'm not saying that these social issues being addressed are a bad thing, but I don't like it when a film's story is sacrificed in order to shove these messages down your throat. It's not fun to watch. And the rest of my cons all kind of have to do with the same thing. They're all part of the hive. I'll make a pun for this movie. So con number 3, this movie is way too short. This is only 91 minutes long, not counting credit. Well, I mean, I'll count the credits because there's more of that shadow puppet stuff, which is fun to watch. But This film is way too fucking short. It's shorter than the original. The first movie is 98 minutes long. This movie is 91 minutes. Not that much of a runtime to make a good legacy sequel, if you ask me. Con number 4, half of this movie makes no sense. Why is this infection spreading all over Anthony's body? Why, in one scene, when Anthony's in the bathroom, does he move, but his reflection does not? What's that? Why is the Sherman Candyman coming after Anthony? This isn't the same Candyman from the first film. If it was the Tony Todd Candyman, I could understand that because his mission wasn't completed. I would presume that if he was to be resurrected, he would want to come back after Anthony all these years later. But it's a different Candyman, so why is Sherman stalking Anthony this whole time? Maybe you could kind of play into the fact that it's a whole hive of Candymen, so they have a hive mind, but that's not explained. That's another thing. Why are there all these Candymen all of a sudden coalescing into this collective entity that is Candyman? That just feels kind of forced and thrown in at the last minute. Yeah, like what Shawnee Boy here is saying. I don't understand why this hive concept was present uh, in this movie's timeline before the events of the first movie. No, Shawnee Boy, it was not in the first film. Because that's another thing. There's no mention of this hive mind concept in the first movie. In the first movie, it's just one spirit, Daniel Robitaille as Candyman, that continually haunts Cabrini Green for the next 100 years. There's no other mentions of other Candymen throughout the years. Also, this is only a question. Is Helen in this hive? I would presume. Well, what do you think, hon? Do you think Helen's part of the hive or no?
Maybe because of what happens at the end of the first movie. Obviously, if you say Helen's name, she will pop up.
Maybe, yeah, you could add Helen into the hive, but that's not explained. Trying to think, what are some other things that don't make sense aside from the third act?
Why is it at the end of the movie when
Third act.
when the girl says Candyman 5 times in the mirror, she doesn't get killed? The cop does.
That's explained because the cop finished the mantra, so the target is now on him and not Brianna. It's like in the original Candyman when Helen finished the mantra in the mirror the first time with Bernadette. So now she's the target. Bernadette's not. So, yeah, a lot of this movie doesn't really make sense. And I can't talk about anything else without getting into the next couple cons. Okay, so con number, fuck, I keep losing track. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, 5. This is the one that has 3 cons in and of itself. So con number 5, the third act in its entirety is a con. So con number 6, the third act feels rushed. The third act feels like it's from an entirely different movie. Con number 7. And con number 8, the third act feels very forced. This is going back to the social commentary elements. Why all of a sudden are these cops acting like assholes trying to intimidate Brianna into going along with their story? Like, why? Is it just to add into the stupid social commentary?
Yes.
Well, again, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but how it's introduced into the film, it feels very just forced, out of left field, and random. And another con that I had with this movie, con number 9, is the ending. Like the very end of this movie, it's very anticlimactic and abrupt. Anthony becomes Candyman, starts killing all these cops. Brianna gets out of the cop car and she finds Anthony killing the last cop. He turns, his face morphs into Daniel Robitaille. He says, "Tell everyone." Cut to black. Roll credits. This will lead me into my final con with this movie. The film feels very incomplete. James A. Janice said in his kill count video for this that he thinks the film could have used an extra 10 minutes. I personally think the film could have used an entire hour, like another hour's worth of footage, because this film feels very chopped apart and very incomplete. That's why I'm pretty sure, like, Shawnee Boy here is right. The third act especially feels like it was completely reshot. Because according to Shawnee Boy here, um, where is it here? Okay, in the original ending, they would have come across Helen's corpse. Um, and I think they would have shown Helen as a ghost in this film too, which would have been cool, and they probably would have had more scenes with Tony Todd. But it's not. And it just so obviously feels very like rushed and taken from another movie, which this will lead me into another element that doesn't make sense. Why is William all of a sudden a bad guy at the end of this movie? What? Because he spends the whole movie, he kind of just feels like an old soul in the neighborhood, who's like just friendly and um wise and kind of acts like a bit of a mentor to Anthony. But then, like, with the last 20 minutes of the movie left, all of a sudden he's this manic, crazy, psychotic, angry black man that wants to fight back against white suppression. Like, where is this coming from? This does not feel like the same character from the rest of the movie beforehand. This just, again, feels like it's torn from an entirely different movie and just thrown in here. And that's another thing that feels part of the forced social commentary, because he talks about blacks being oppressed all throughout the decades and he wants to try to fight back against the white man. I'm not trying to come off as being racist, but it just feels very forced and shoved down your throat. And it doesn't feel like a natural part of the movie. Um, yeah. The third act of this movie overall might be my biggest issue with this film because of all these issues. It feels rushed. It feels like it's from a different movie. It's forced. The film feels incomplete and it's very anticlimactic. It's just, it leaves you wanting more, but it also leaves you confused because half of this movie doesn't make sense. I very strongly suspect on my DVD here, there's an alternate ending and deleted and extended scenes. I don't know how much there is, but I still strongly suspect there was at least maybe a half hour to 45 minutes worth of footage snipped out of this movie. And I want to see all that added back in. Probably would have helped the movie make a lot more sense. Because as it currently stands, it feels like the shell of what it used to be, sadly. So that's all I have to say about Candyman 2021.
I'm gonna go get your baby. Tell me when you're done. Okay? And then I'll come home and finish dinner.
Candyman 2021. Con, you give it a 5?
Yeah.
Cool. It's not a great movie, unfortunately. It's not a worthy sequel to the original Candyman. It was not worth waiting through 3 fucking delays. And it was not worth waiting 29 years for a proper legacy sequel. This is kind of quite disappointing. And is sadly not a great movie. I can see the effort. I can see that they tried. There's the shell of a good movie here, but it's botched, unfortunately, which is very frustrating. This is definitely one of those movies that it's the opposite of the original. I like the original Candyman more and more every time I watch it. I like this movie less and less the more times I watch it, which is a damn shame. I was also originally going to give this movie a 5 out of 10, but upon further scrutiny, I think I'm going to give this a 3 out of 10. Sadly, I can see that they tried. There are things to like about it, but it's not worth all the flaws. So, with all that being said, post your comments down below and let me know what you think. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and share this video with your friends. Look forward to tomorrow's video with me and Shawnee Boy review a very old classic. Not super old, but it's the year 2023, and there was a lot of good movies that came out in the year 2003. And I've been enjoying watching and reviewing these 20th anniversary movies. So take a guess at what it's going to be. And as always, go out and remember, sweets to the sweet. Don't you want a sweet? And I'll see you guys in the next video.